Días y buenas tardes. Buenos días y buenas tardes.
Good morning and good evening. My name is Fabrizio Falloni. I'm the Deputy Director of the International Fund for Agricultural Development, Independent Office of Evaluation. And welcome to this regional workshop, the assessment of the dry corridor experience from the IFAD. And I would like to share some information about this virtual event. First of all, please note that there is simultaneous interpretation in English and Spanish. You may find the globe icon at the bottom of your screen. So please choose your preferred language.
At the bottom of the screen in Zoom. Por favor, mantengan su micrófono apagado y la cámara encendida.
Please keep your cameras on and your microphone off. And you may use the Q&A function, the feature in Zoom, if you have any questions. As far as the structure or agenda of this event, first of all, we're going to listen to the introduction of the head of the Independent Office of Evaluation. Afterwards, the IEO team will present key findings. Then we will listen to the different recommendations on the IFAD team. And finally, on the very last session, numerous representatives from the government and the Central American system and different research institutions, as well as other small agricultural experts will share their experience. Thank you very much indeed. So first of all, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Indran Naidu, the Director of the Independent Office of Evaluation. You have the floor, Mr. Naidu. Thank you.
Distinguished Dr. Ing Nick Kenna Estrada Orzonco, Vice Minister of Rural Economic Development, Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock and Food, Republic of Guatemala, Distinguished Ing Amilcar Landaverda, General Manager of Rural Adelanta, General Directorate of Rural Development, Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock, Republic of El Salvador, Distinguished Manuel Antonio Martinez Guzman, Project Administrative Unit, Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock, Republic of Honduras, dear Ms. Elena Gomez, Senior Researcher, Regional Program of Research on Development and Environment, Prisma Foundation, dear Ms. Merling Preza Ramos, General Manager, Prodocorp, dear Mr. Oscar Questada, Advisor to the Executive Management of Central American Integration System, SICA, dear Ms. Claudia Ranaboldo, Senior Consultant of IOE IFAD, representatives of IFAD, partner institutional and international organizations, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure to be part of this virtual workshop organized by the Independent Office of Evaluation of IFAD in collaboration with the governments of El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras and Nicaragua, and the Regional Division of IFAD for Latin America and the Caribbean. This workshop follows the finalization of the sub-regional evaluation of IFAD's experience in the dry corridor of Central America and provides an opportunity to share and discuss the main findings and recommendations with the main stakeholders. I express my appreciation to the governments of El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua collaboration on this evaluation. I also recognize the support of IFAD Program Management Department, in particular, Mr. Donald Brown, Associate Vice President, Ms. Rosanna Polastri, Director of IFAD's Latin American and Caribbean Division, Mr. Enrique Hennings, Head of the Mesoamerica and Caribbean Hub, Mr. Reno Castro and Ms. Isabella de la Pena, Country Directors and other IFAD colleagues that have collaborated with this evaluation. Finally, I thank the evaluation team led by Mr. Fabrizio Felloni, Deputy Director, IOE Maciel Jimenez, Evaluation Analyst, and Antonella Sisti, Evaluation Assistant. Thanks also to the consultants, in particular, Claudio Ranaboldo and Daniel Wiesner, who are with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, let me first highlight the importance of the independent evaluation function. the Independent Office of Evaluation of IFAD undertakes impartial and evidence-based evaluations of projects, country programs, and corporate policies to assess the results achieved and to generate lessons to enhance the impact of IFAD-supported development interventions on people's lives. More specifically, this sub-regional evaluation has focused on the Dry Corridor ecological zone, with case studies in El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua during the period 2008 to 2023. It has identified 15 loans provided by IFAD with intervention in the Dry Corridor. Cumulatively, these projects have achieved coverage of 71% of the municipalities in the Dry Corridor. They supported grassroots, rural organizations, and focused on training, investment plans, and formalization of producer groups. A third of these projects promoted the socioeconomic transformation of rural areas within the Dry Corridor by promoting business development, facilitating market access, and strengthening value chains. A critical element to this was improving product quality and promoting sales on remunerative international markets and domestic niche markets. However, the absence of specific strategic guidelines for the sub-region or of the Dry Corridor hampered adaptation to particular structural characteristics. Moreover, there was no clear-cut territorial approaches to prioritize interventions and generate a critical mass. The project supported pertinent natural resource management and climate adaptation initiatives, but there was a risk of scattering small-scale activities. IFAD has valuable experience in other sub-regions in Latin America and the Caribbean that can provide lessons for working in the Dry Corridor. This knowledge needs to be better shared with the development partners. The evaluation recommends preparing strategic guidelines for a sub-regional action plan with specific attention to the Dry Corridor and its multiple development challenges, including agroclimatic, socioeconomic, political, institutional, and cultural dimensions. IFAD and governments need an integrative territorial approach so that resilient family farming and territorial development become central themes of cooperation with the sub-region. Now, with your support, we can gain a better understanding of future opportunities and ways to overcome constraints to promote inclusive, sustainable, and resilient transformation of the rural economy. I thank you for your attention and wish you well for a productive event. Thank you.
Gracias, señor Naidu. Y ahora vamos a presentar un resumen de los...
Thank you very much, Mr. Naidu. We're going to present the key findings of the sub-regional assessment of the Dry Corridor assessment of the IEO. If we kindly share the screen, please, the PowerPoint. Next slide, please. Thank you. The main objectives of this assessment are the identification of challenges and opportunities in the Dry Corridor of the IFAD, the analysis of the different approaches, the different intervention tasks from the IFAD, and the different strategies, forging alliances with the regional, national, and international consortiums. So the period is 2008 to 2023, with 4 countries: El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. Now, the activities that we have included were different IFAD financed activities and allowances and other IFAD initiatives like the Global Remittances Program, the cooperation with the Remittance Facility, the International Land Coalition, as well as other indigenous people assistance programs. Thank you. Now, the data sources, we have used a relevant study. We have reviewed all existing research, 14 donations. So these loans are individual loans and donations are multi-country donations, namely, sub-regional donations. And there has been an assessment of other investments from different cooperative units. We have carried out different hybrid or remote interviews with IFAD officers, and we have reviewed 4 different countries, including country visits. We've also analyzed the geographic information system and satellite images. On purple, you will see the area which is included as the dry corridor pursuant to the Organization for Food and Agriculture's description. These are the most comprehensive studies and these are the municipalities included in the dry corridor. You can see the map for the dry corridor. On the next slide on the screen, you will see the location of the IFAD projects, including the 15 loans, and we have seen certain loans would be included in the IFAD dry corridor area, and others were out of the dry corridor. So there were exclusive projects for the dry corridor and other non-dry corridor projects. The slide shows you percentage of municipalities of the dry corridor that have received financing from the IFAD office. That shows you the coverage, which was really high indeed. So on aggregate for the last 15 years. And if you analyze the first non-IFAD column, 0%. So that means that all municipalities in El Salvador had coverage from the IFAD loans, and some others had more than 3 projects. In Guatemala, 71% of municipalities had that coverage, 43% in Honduras, 90% in Guatemala. So the very high percentage.
So let's have a look at our next slides. We have multiple opportunities and challenges in the dry corridor. So in terms of challenges, we have the climate variability in this area, in the dry corridor. In addition, we have institutional fragility, a high number of violence, illegal activities, and there are also various dimensions to poverty, that is socioeconomic, nutritional. We have a terrible problem with chronic malnutrition in children and also obesity in adults. We also have marginalized groups, important groups for IFAD, like women, young people, and indigenous populations, and also migration, which has positive and negative effects. In terms of negative effects, we are losing a lot of people who are useful to us, a lot of workforce, etc. And we have migratory flows and financial flows that are also quite complicated. In terms of opportunities, we have agroclimatic opportunities in the dry corridor. We have great farming opportunities, including export products like coffee, meat, honey, cashew nuts, which are in very high demand, like in international markets like the EU and the USA. So we have to recognize the dry corridor, but not victimize it, as the government representative said. In terms of opportunities, we also have economic activities, remittances, also environmental services, ecotourism, other services. Another important opportunity is the presence of organizations like SICA for international cooperation in this area. And it's also important to highlight international cooperation as well as sub-regional cooperation, as we've shown in our report. And something we've seen over the last few years, we see organizations who have been laying out specific programs and strategies for the dry corridor, including the FAO and the BCIE. Next slide, please. Here, we'd like to address the pertinent strategic coherence and operational coherence of what we're doing. First of all, IFAD does not have an explicit strategy focusing on the dry corridor. We do have individual national strategies for El Salvador, Honduras, and other countries, but we don't have a sub-regional strategy. In terms of country strategies, COSOPs, over the last few years, they reflect national policies for management of natural resources and climate adaptation. Our social and economic challenges and institutional challenges in the dry corridor don't seem to be vital. What we see is that both in strategies, operations, loans, etc., we lack a territorial approach to allow to integrate interventions and local institutions. So we're running a potential risk of scattering our conventional activities. However, we do see emerging experiences which are valuable, interesting. For instance, we see that there are plans at municipal level integrating various activities in El Salvador, climate adaptation programs, and in Nicaragua, we find plans on basic infrastructure. These are a first step which we can continue to consolidate in the near future. There are other opportunities that haven't been capitalized on in terms of knowledge management. IFAD has some very interesting experiences in other Latin American regions in terms of business strategies and plans, territorial development, also activities for adaptation to a semi-arid climate scenario, but not all of these have been capitalized on in this program and in our operations in these countries. In addition, we observe that there is a lack of synergy between loans and grants or subsidies. For example, IFAD funds climate adaptation for family agriculture and farming, the youth, digital business services, and services indexed to the climate, but we see that there is some kind of restriction to innovation by adopting this approach. So I'm going to share my next couple of slides, and I will be sharing my presentation with Maciel Jimenez and Claudio Naboldo so that they can now take the floor. Thank you very much. Now, regarding the main outcomes, Maciel, I'm not sure we can listen to you. Can we hear you? Yes, we can, it appears. Please go ahead. Thank you. So regarding the main outcomes in our sub-region regarding IFAD interventions, we've seen that we have overcome the expectations, but it's important to highlight that the achievements made are the result of a sequence of interventions on the part of NGOs, bilateral organizations, multilateral ones, and also IFAD. We've seen, of course, improvement in productivity and risk assessment and management, but we need to do more. In terms of households, we need to improve conditions of hygiene, health, that is better drinking water, better heating, and so on, to avoid gastrointestinal and respiratory illnesses, and also the greater burden for women. And in terms of natural resources, climate change and environment, we've seen a lot that has been done, but not enough has been done in terms of dissemination of information and use of information. We also note that there has been improved management of water resources, but we still have very little data on effective use of water resources. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now, so let's go in depth into the results. We see that 1/3 of loans have improved access to markets in terms of paid markets and value chains, especially coffee, cocoa beans, honey, cashew nuts. And we see that Nicab Depta and Emprendesur and also Amanecer Rural have had a principal role here. However, we did not note systematic improvement in terms of the upskilling and capabilities of national or local public institutions. We have to say that El Salvador is an exception, also Nicaragua. In Nicaragua, we've seen, for example, improvements in access to drinking water and basic infrastructure. But as to fairness and equity, as to women, we see that thanks to IFAD, there has been greater participation of women in rural organization, also in financial services. But in terms of youth, we see that they have failed expectations due to the context, their background, and because there have not been enough initiative focused on their challenges and interests. Finally, in terms of the indigenous population, we see that participation is very varied, given it depends on their geographic concentration and the focus devoted to the indigenous population by these projects. And this is really important. I'd like to hand over now to my colleague, Claudia. Yes, good morning, good afternoon. So next slide, please. And let's now focus on innovation. In general terms, we find that the approach to loans was very conventional, basically based on business plans, public policies, based on the value chain, but very focused on the value chain and productive development, more production. In most of the operations, we do see that there is a great approach to public policy and family-based farming. Most of the initiatives launched by IFAD together with the governments are not terribly new. They're not terribly innovative. From the point of view of new components, I must say that they were not feasible and they did not have accessibility in the areas covered by the projects. We're talking about irrigation by drip, gathering water, greenhouses, benefits, and also equipment for drying. So the most interesting innovations appear in the latter phases of operations at territorial level, when we began to talk about, and people began to talk about local plans for adaptation to climate change in El Salvador. Here, they have adopted a more comprehensive approach to the territory, but also they have tried to articulate everything with interinstitutional collaboration. There are also other innovations in terms of technical solutions and assistance to vulnerable populations through pilot experiences based on donations. These are digital solutions for companies and financial services, very small scale, and also micro insurance based on weather and meteorological indicators for producers of beans and corn and maize. But in general terms, they were not really well adapted for, to make the most of the loans available and the financial assistance available. Next slide, please. On sustainability of our outcomes, we have focused on different levels and dimensions of sustainability. Now, on the institutional level, very interesting, the IFAD and government work together to think about planning together. So we find a number of plans that could indeed promote sustainability, territorial plans, which are more recent, and also organizational plans. These refer to development of organizations, of relatively fragile organizations, also business plans and livelihood plans related to families. Now, what restrictions did we find? Well, quite a few are relevant. Number one, we found that there is not good coordination between the plans. Secondly, in general terms, we're talking about short-term plans. Thirdly, in many cases, these plans set a priority for a top-bottom approach. That is, they were designed and implemented by external suppliers or companies with very little quality control. And then we also saw that territorial plans were not linked with municipal plans or community plans which were already in existence. I think Fabrizio pointed it out at the very beginning. We're talking about a social and economic context which presents enormous challenges, lack of legality, violence, migrations, which cannot be resolved by one single organization or IFAD projects. So we need greater coordination in policies. And also in some cases, we've seen that changes in governments and policies has had an enormous impact, for example, on family agriculture. In terms of sustainability in relation to human capital or human resources, we observed that there was a huge effort in terms of investment in training activities, upskilling, providing better skills, workshops, field workshops as well. But all the actors, local actors in the 4 countries, underlined that these were activities that didn't always have the best quality, and that it was quite difficult to measure the effective use and application of new knowledge. In terms of economic and financial factors, I think we've already said enough, but we have a mixed situation here. On the one part, we see that there have been difficulties in terms of projects to try to meet the requirements of quality, especially in terms of transformation and marketing of products. But there is one point that we would like to underline, and that is that there are many products in the value chain, which are linked to agri-exports in Central America. And this hasn't been explored enough. There are initiatives in the case of youth, for example. We've studied new markets like gastronomy, tourism, rural areas with green businesses. So there are a lot of opportunities which haven't been explored properly to try to connect producers with local public acquisitions and other markets. Next slide. So sustainability related to natural resources and adaptation to climate change. Well, this has been in the IFAD program since 2010. So projects, in some cases, were not designed following these criteria. And in other cases, they did make an effort to try and bring on board these criteria in their projects. So we have a lot of options: management of natural resources, that is, techniques for diversification of crops, rotation of crops, soil and land conservation, forestry, reforestation, very interesting agroforestry, and also brigades, crews to prevent wildfires, also efficient use of timber. There are other measures for climate resilience, like better collection of water, storage of water, drip watering, greenhouses. And there are a number of varieties of crops: coffee, cocoa beans, cardamom, others which are resistant to dry periods and seasons. But these activities, which are very pertinent, are implemented in a very fragmented way with very little reach around the territory and with lack of coordination with other actors. There are other risks of damaging effects, like shrimp farms and shadow homes or houses in El Salvador, also agrochemicals, pesticides, and also inadequate disposal of solid waste. Well, thank you very much. Next slide, please. Let's take a look at a summary of our findings. So first of all, the operations funded by IFAD achieved very huge coverage in the municipalities of the dry corridor. devoting special attention to local organizations and the needs of communities, especially the needs of communities, as we have just heard. Secondly, we see that some interventions have been extremely supportive of social and economic transformation of the rural areas of the dry corridor. We've seen it in business development and strengthening value chains. Number three, we think we lack sub-regional strategic guidance and a territorial approach. We have them at national level, but not officially at sub-regional and local level. And fourthly, so we need a broader approach. And fourthly, as I was saying, as we explained earlier, so we need more territorial and local approach. And finally, we do see that there is a high presence of donors in the dry corridor, and the IFAD and the government must demonstrate added value and specialization. Next slide, please. So our recommendations, first of all, we need to create sub-regional strategic alignments. It could be an internal document with specific focus on the dry corridor and its multiple challenges. It could be an internal document. It could be a short, hard-hitting document, but we need to support individual strategies of countries with a document that, as I say, can be short, but showing the comparative advantages of working with IFAD and what are the challenges and opportunities that we can cover with investment and so on. And as we said in our presentation, secondly, is to promote comprehensive approaches to territorial development with family agriculture, which is multifunctional, at the focus to develop resilience in the territory and local government. We've seen a number of examples which can be rolled out at municipal level in Nicaragua and Salvador.
In addition, with regards to the third recommendation, which is to fine-tune the instruments for focusing on the users, in particular young people and women, with particular attention to territories and agro-farming activities and non-agro-farming activities, with cross-cutting focus on family activities, and also looking at innovative approaches in the dry corridor, taking advantage of IFAD in Central America and in the sub-regions of Latin America and the Caribbean, and taking advantage of the experience with subsidies or donations, because there were pilot donations with very useful experiences, as we explained beforehand. And then in terms of IFAD, we have the sub-region with a high presence of donors supporting sub-regional cooperation and helping governments to revise and renew those public projects. So those are the main things. Thank you very much for your attention. And now we can give the floor to the management in IFAD, and we can start with the regional director for Latin America and Caribbean, Dr. Rosana Narasvi, and then the director of the country of IFAD in Salvador, René Castro. So you have the floor. Thank you very much, Fabricio. I wanted to apologize on behalf of the Vice President Donald Brown, who wasn't able to join us today due to personal reasons. But I have his presentation that was scheduled on the agenda, and he gave me the go-ahead to read it, and if not, I can go forward with my own, whatever you prefer. Please do go ahead. Thank you. So I'm going to speak in English then.
Distinguidos participantes, colegas, me complace.
Excellencies, it is a pleasure to welcome you to this workshop,
which is especially interesting given its sub-regional nature. The evaluation presents different strategies adopted by countries in the Central American region to face common development challenges. It also highlights the importance of maintaining a consistent approach in designing and delivering IFAD's program in the region. This is a valuable exercise to identify areas for further improvement, as well as synergies among projects in different countries. The evaluation confirmed that over the past 15 years, IFAD-funded projects achieved coverage of 71% of the municipalities in the dry corridor, with attention to local organization and basic needs such as access to food and water. We are proud of these results, and we will continue to invest and improve our strategic focus in the region to better serve our clients. Management generally concurs with the findings and conclusions stemming from this evaluation. I will briefly touch upon of them. Then the Regional Director of Latin America, myself, will go into deeper analysis. First, management concurs on the importance of strategic guidelines that help anticipate the main development challenges in the region, such as climate change, institutional fragility, and migration. At the same time, IFAD works through country strategic opportunities programs, which are the COSOPs, and sovereign operations at the national level according to its business model, rather than regional level. Instead of developing a standalone guidelines, IFAD will seek to liaise with strategic partners and join alliances that support the development of a roadmap and guidelines in the sub-region. Second, management agrees on adopting integrated approaches and will continue promoting them. IFAD projects in the dry corridor include, as essential elements, the involvement of local public institutions, attentions to local economy in transition, and support to resilient agri-food systems. Third, management will continue to promote a territorial development and agri-food system approach with a special focus on women, youth, and indigenous peoples. Country teams are tailoring interventions based on the beneficiaries' specific demand, spanning from basic needs to entrepreneurship support and according to the preference of the people we serve. This is to encourage young people to engage in productive activities in rural areas. In addition, management will support innovative approaches in the dry corridor with attention to knowledge management, strategic partnerships, and public policy dialogue. Management will continue to pursue non-lending activities through strategic external partners in the region, given the limited availability of resources allocated to this area. Complementing in-house technical expertise, with IFAD's collaboration with strategic external partners has become key in advancing the innovation agenda in the region, particularly on digital agriculture. Finally, IFAD will reaffirm our leadership in terms of our comparative advantage in the region while sharpening our value position. IFAD will continue to facilitate innovative solutions and promote South-South technical cooperation exchanges with the Central America Integration System and other actors. Let me conclude by thanking IOE for maintaining a participatory approach throughout this evaluation and for incorporating the earlier feedback received by management. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, señora directora.
Thank you very much, Director. And next, we have the country director from El Salvador, Miquel Castro. Thank you very much. And Director, I'm not sure whether you wanted to give your own presentation. No, you go ahead. It's very similar to mine. Thanks ever so much. And dear participants and representatives from the government and civil society, it's a great pleasure to be able to share this session with you and to be able to discuss the opportunities that exist in the dry corridor. Thank you too to my colleagues from the IOE for presenting this report, which will help us to improve in the future. And as is well known, the dry corridor is quite unique in the world, but it isn't exclusive in experiences climate change. And there are other many aspects. There's violence, food insecurity, changes in population, and the poor management of natural resources. We need to study the effect of remittances also on the population, in particular the younger population, and which affects them participating in society or even makes them migrate. There is overlapping with other development programs, and it is true that we can talk about the need for there to be greater cooperation, but at the same time we can underline the positive side of IFAD, which fills in loopholes where there is scarcity to ensure that nobody is left behind. The extent of the problem requires palliative actions to take structural measures in order to foster the resilience of poorer households, particularly taking into account the negative effects of prolonged drought in farming production, particularly affected by the hurricane season that has occurred very recently. Young people don't see a future on the land, and this is something that we have to work on, and that where there's room for improvement. And in that respect, we should find more appealing situations such as technological innovation, the adoption of precision farming, and the sophistication of agribusiness. And this is the direction that we are moving in. And in this respect, it is important that we should have a territorial vision, taking into account the most vulnerable populations, empowerment and innovation as the central axis for these projects. In addition, it is necessary to take into account classical components such as work on health and safety, water systems, improved cooking systems, drinking water, safe water, and the distribution of workload between women and children. It is true that over the years, things have improved significantly in those things that have been carried out by IFAD, and we have learned lessons. For example, the relationship of technical assistance that increased significantly in the response to the need for having more transformational models. We have also adopted long and short-term farming methods in order to transform and ensure we help ecosystems recover. And we have adopted response measures for climatic emergencies. We need to strike a balance between science and demand, and there have been successful cases. For example, the Nicadapta project in Nicaragua, where we have worked on an assessment of the yield of coffee, cocoa, and climate predictions and forecasts in order to affect production models. One of the most important characteristics in grants in Latin America and the Caribbean is how it complements the IFAD subsidies. And we have to understand that a lot of the things that have been underlined by the IOE's report are not things that have been taken into account by the governments necessarily, but rather they respond to the needs of member states and are looking for working mechanisms in order to foster innovation. We have had very successful cases through bigger donations and grants that have been put into these projects and more regional participation. Recently in Guatemala, the IFAD, and together with the ISHOR program, has adopted certain programs with preventive measures to build up resilience before climate change. This has been very successful and has been backed by the PMA and other associations in Central America and the private sector. Through the OneTech program with FinTech and Antech, these measures have been targeting particularly the dry corridor, and in El Salvador. Financial help proved to be very successful and will be scaled up in new programs, in the 2.0 program, for there to be a good sustainable use of remittances in order to mitigate risks. In this respect, I'd like to underline the importance of attracting greater numbers of donations to the dry corridor that will allow us to reach early solutions in our operations and generating positive experiences in the area. With regards to territorial integration, I think that there is a very interesting opportunity to explore what the governments and senior management is doing within IFAD, particularly within the context of CICAD. And thanks to the progress, we could strengthen agroclimatic systems and hydrological systems, both from the infrastructure's point of view and also share learnings and information or lessons learned. We will collaborate from within IFAD to foster this type of integration. We could also explore the formalization of a sub-regional carbon market and strengthen the accreditation systems to ensure there is zero deforestation and move to more sophisticated markets. It's important to understand that what we're implementing has been part of an important process where new operations in El Salvador and Honduras are focusing on the basins and integrating social inclusion, the management of natural resources, and the improvement of food systems. I think that there is room still to improve. Thank you very much, colleagues, and we are at your disposal. Thank you very much. And the regional director would also like to take the floor, I believe. Yes, I'd just like to add something to what René has just mentioned to us. The three most important recommendations that we have made, and I don't want to be repetitive and take up time. In reality, there are four recommendations. The first recommendation is that based on this evaluation, this is a very important assessment. This is the first time this has been done on a multi-country and multi-subject basis, makes it the ideal place in order to implement these recommendations. And this would be based on the strategy drawn up together with the governments, whom are our customers, and also taking into account the support to investments that allows us to manage those climatic risks with activities that allows us to improve the production of small-scale farmers. The second recommendation, and this is something which is quite useful for us, that is with regards to prioritizing the actions of the local community and move towards sustainable mechanisms over time and be able to scale this up in the private section. And IFAD working with the private sector is hugely important. And the financing we supply to countries hopefully then will have a greater impact in this manner and allow for there to be more sustainable income and revenues. And then the next point is the management of basins and micro basins, which are critical to strengthen investments in the dry corridor, as René Castro quite rightly pointed out. And finally, something that is very important, and we spoke about this when this evaluation was being carried out, and this is coordinating with international bodies with regards to this dry corridor. The coordination has to be strengthened. It has to be more constant over time, more continuous over time, because if we're assessing the impacts, well, if we made these investments in a more coordinated fashion, then this would be more successful. So this coordination has to take place with the other international players. But in addition, we need to align this IFAD financing with governmental programs, because at the end of the day, countries and governments are the owners of those projects, and they are the ones who decide where their investments go. So the IFAD's mission in the dry corridor is to work with local communities to improve the productivity of the land and to be better prepared for the climate impact, climate change impacts, and to work with local communities, as I say. So thank you very much to the Independent Office of Evaluation of the IFAD, and also thank you for the participation of all of you in this workshop. And I hope that there will be a very productive discussion and debate, and hopefully we will be able to get input from all of you to be able to continue improving, and all those countries members of the IFAD too. Thank you very much to the Regional Director for Latin America and Caribbean, and thank you to the Country Director of IFAD in El Salvador. So If you like, we can leave questions, the Q&A session, till the end of today so that we can then have all the contributions then. And now we'll hear about the experiences and rural development in the dry corridor in terms of public, national and sub-regional policies and the perspectives of a independent research center and the Coffee Producers Organization. And all countries will have around 5 minutes to share their experiences with us. Now, we had the confirmation of the presence, although I don't see the presence of the Vice Minister Estrada for Rural Economic Development from the Republic of Guatemala, but I don't believe this person is connected, and also the Director General for the Republic of El Salvador. I'm not sure if they're connected. I can't see them connected, but we do have Manuel Antonio Martin Guzman, Director of Projects of the Secretariat for Agriculture and Livestock from the Republic of Honduras. Thank you for your presence and welcome. So perhaps we can start this conversation with you. So, Director, could you explain what the national programs are, at least the main ones, in your countries that cover the dry corridor? What are the main matters? Who are the main donors, if there are any? And then looking forward in time, according to you, what are the matters and challenges that exist in the dry corridor where it would be necessary for there to be international support, and in particular, IFAD support? Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much to all of you, and thank you to all participants. Thank you for the invitation to this event, and I apologize for the fact that the minister is not here, Laura Suazo, who is on a mission on an international level currently. I feel very satisfied with this sub-regional evaluation and report because it gives us a better context about the social and economic situation, and in particular with regards to the support to rural populations in our countries. Quite clearly, we identify with the good number of elements. Around 56 aspects have been outlined in the executive summary, and so this allows us to continue prioritizing our policies. There's no doubt that the experience of IFAD is essential, and in Honduras, we are particularly grateful for this, underlying the importance of technologies and entrepreneurship and social integration, etc., all very relevant factors and elements that have been taken into account already with greater clarity within our strategies and policies in Honduras. And in Honduras, currently, we have given priority to, as a state policy, to agri-food with a perspective 2023 to 2033 that takes into account a lot of the elements that have been brought up in this sub-regional evaluation.
Tal vez decir lo que antes hablábamos estuvimos hablando en el 2010,
We were discussing in 2010, 2021 as a dry corridor, as an area, but it encompasses 170 municipalities, 70% of the Honduran municipalities, but almost the entire country is a dry corridor. So in these periods of drought that we have undergone very recently, the winter was a bit delayed for 1.5 months to be precise. So the impact of drought is of utmost relevance. So we really need to focus on the infrastructure-related projects and natural resources projects. Those are the most relevant projects. We've always had the support from the EU, the World Bank, IFAD, Switzerland, Canada, and Spain funds, and many of them continue to be key players, financing institutions, if I may. And the current agricultural program continues to focus on agricultural production initiatives that are financed and oriented to technical assistance, technical infrastructure, research, and markets in agribusinesses. Those are the main pillars, main guidelines. But we also want to focus broader, not only focusing on the dry corridor, but we want to focus on those 2,000 communities in severe poverty, expanding our views and focusing on the less off, where we have non-reimbursable funds with donations and numerous grants. And quite sadly, some cooperative farmers have seen their production, their output being decreased, especially in 2024, for instance. German cooperation is reducing their contributions, and Switzerland as well. But we have a strong focus on local development, on community structures, and in this regard, a very strong focus lies on policies, the involvement of farmers, water associations, rural savings banks, and also some other activities focused on climate management and climate change management, with a strong focus on Afro-descendant and indigenous communities. Now, with the presence of the international cooperation in the agricultural sector, we have the Inter-American Development Bank, IDB for its English acronym, and there has been recently a reduction of the presence of some of the cooperative players. They have recently changed their financing approach, and recently a new program in support to the Climate Green Fund has been developed for 2024-2031 for the 7 countries involved. Just by way of example, and in 2024, we have recently signed, well, governments of Honduras, Salvador, and Guatemala, the research project for risk innovation, agricultural risk innovation in the dry corridor, with the intention to ensure an adequate management of resources. Likewise, an additional initiative has been recently developed with the Brazilian Agency for Cooperation and different farming associations in Brazil. As a member of the Agricultural Secretariat of our government, we always focus on different projects that aim at developing agricultural development, with a strong focus on the dry corridor, of course, but with grants from the IDB and the World Bank, among others. So that's what I wanted to mention. And likewise, I wanted to point at the importance of regional associations and instances and entities, the Agricultural Fund in Latin America, with a strong focus on food safety. The integration of information as well is of paramount importance. Having more information in order to adequately manage these associations, and everything that has to do with the improvement of resilient capabilities in food safety in the dry corridor. And end of 2023, alongside with the SICA and the agricultural ministries, we gathered in Rome with the cooperation from the Organization for Food and Agriculture, focusing on climate risk. We did a digital mapping of the lands. We want to understand the type of land that we do have, because this is something that we are not that sure about in certain territories, and the agricultural innovation and entrepreneurship capabilities among SMEs, as well as the comprehensive systems for irrigation. So our country has recently focused on a national plan, national irrigation plan, in order to really increase our irrigation capabilities in our countries. And well, if you ask me about the challenges, they're quite numerous that have been laid out in this study, or the conclusions and findings from the IFAD. But how to strengthen productive capabilities, agricultural farming capabilities? How to ensure adequate sustainability, boosting productive change in a sustainable fashion, driven by consumption, and how to reduce those products that are affecting us very severely. We also have another challenge. We need to improve our technologies. We need to ensure climate validation of our climate technologies, intelligent, smart technologies that really can help us enormously. And also how to ensure a more effective, adequate management of remittances and adequate management of expenses. Just to mention a few, and the importance of external cooperation, which is still really important. But how shall these be reflected in adequate planning and the budgeting exercise, and also the territorial budgets? How can we really bring them down to the different farmers associations and regional governments? Well, across the board, we couldn't agree more with the findings of this report. And I found it very interesting to see the internal synergies between grants and loans, something to be borne in mind. And likewise, by way of conclusion, IFAD's efforts must include how to implement or how to ensure the adequate application of projects, but how to make the most of the oversight functions of IFAD and monitoring functions, not only to see IFAD as a financial injection, but also benefit from the financial, well, their knowledge, and to ensure transparency and anti-corruption in all of our processes. Thank you very much indeed. Well, thank you for your most valuable contribution. We are now going to hand over the floor to Dr. Eliana Gomez, Principal Researcher of the Development Program headquartered in Salvador. Ms. Gomez, would you kindly clarify the current challenges and opportunities in the dry corridor from a regional perspective? Good morning and good afternoon. Thank you very much indeed, Fabrizio. I would like to thank the representatives of the social organizations and IFAD. Most of the topics that have been raised today present numerous challenges facing our region, and namely the dry corridor. Namely, when we talk about having a territorial approach, coordinating among the different agencies, we really need to focus on prior experiences. By example, 10 years ago, IFAD mainly focused on the strong political dialogue, leaving a strong legacy in terms of support and innovation, family farming and indigenous farming, which is key vis-a-vis agricultural approaches, but also to boost innovation that has been raised in the morning. So in my opinion, it is always very important to favor these dialogues, because this is going to benefit our region. We can't talk about agricultural or climate transformations in our dry corridor if there isn't any smooth smooth dialogue among the different players, those players that have the answers, they are key in developing innovation in the past. Therefore, in order to really bring about all of these projects, we really need to strengthen dialogue to foster an exchange of perspectives, views, opinions among the different players and the governments in order to ensure the adequate application of innovations that could be very innovative, but also that require constant learning and interaction. By way of example, when we talk about approach, if the IFAD talks about a territorial approach, we have found other cooperative experts talking about the ecological restoration. That requires a dialogue, because all territories have different approaches, different views, and then we all want the same for our territories. And so I would like to kindly ask IFAD to foster those forums for exchange, regional forums, because we are living a very thorny period in this region. So land is still a place that lacks the strategic view in many cases, that, however, suffers an enormous climate impact and environmental impact. And we can't think about the dry corridor without having a holistic view for the whole region, because this is really intrinsic in what the dry corridor really means and needs. And this means leveraging on pre-existing experiences and the governance in the territories. But many of these governance point at other policies that require a dynamic, resilient land where the peasants and the farming associations have a voice. And the Central American Triangle, these expels individuals where they do not find their future of the territory. They don't feel part of the territory. And IFAD has also had very good experiences involving these individuals, drawing the lessons from all of these actions in the past and giving them continuity and constant update, because this is a clear bet. This is really our ambition to foster dialogue, ensuring coordination, strengthening capabilities, and leveraging on these lessons learned and giving back to the population this hope, because the population feels helpless, and this is quite fragmented, and people and organizations tend to be more and more fragile. And we are undergoing very severe, devastating climate conditions in these areas, enduring problems that we had long forgotten, and it seems nothing had happened there. We see the same victims, they're very old problems, and we don't believe this is a sustainable future. The different players are numerous in order to save this situation. But first of all, the productive associations, they need to raise their voices. They need to strengthen their experiences, because the peasants and farming associations bring about an awful lot of innovation, resilience, of course, and they have been boosting these initiatives in these organizations. We can talk about the biggest presence of women in leadership positions, where ecology was the answer to those situations. Not only the field of food safety, where women take the lead, but not only in Central America, Guatemala, Salvador lead by example, but we've seen great efforts that really link producers with public procurement and more specialized markets. Therefore, what IFAD did in the last 10 years going back to the family agricultural policy, peasants and indigenous farming, that would be going back to these prior experiences and undergoing a very complex situation in Central American region and the dry corridor. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Muchísimas gracias a usted por su intervención.
Thank you very much indeed for your kind remarks. We have now Merlin Presa Ramos, the General Director for Prodicop, is a second-tier cooperative headquartered in Nicaragua, coffee farmers that are adapted ecologically to the dry corridor with a demand in international markets. So Prodicop is very knowledgeable about this practice, and they are now here to share their experiences of small producers, success stories. Thank you very much indeed. Good morning. And good afternoon to all of you. I would like to take the opportunity to thank the Independent Office of Evaluation of IFAD to give me the opportunity to share this kind of experience with all of you. So this is quite challenging. We just have a few minutes of time to share the success stories and challenges of our second-tier cooperative. We have been working in the cooperative sector for the last 30 years. We've got 38 cooperative members, 3,000 families, and we are in Nicaragua, Estelí, Madrid, and New Segovia in Nicaragua. A main area of work was the coffee negotiation in the international market. We sell coffee with different labels and certifications in the United States, Canada, and Europe. And 46% is America, and Europe is 43%. On average, we've got 70,000 buckets of coffee, where 80% is a fair trade, and 30,000 buckets of organic coffee with a strong focus on agricultural farming. The main success stories we are going to now share in the next few minutes, how we've worked in the past, and please note that we were beneficiaries from the Nicaragua project. The Nicaragua project is a strong success in our cooperatives and gave a lot of support to our cooperative members. And as such, we have now a reputation in our market. Thus, as an example of involving the whole chain, internationally speaking, we are a leading cooperative because of the coffee that we sell, where we are present, our footprint, and the quality of our product, but also the customer loyalty of our, or the members' loyalty of our members. So our contracts guarantee product to the markets.
We work on the entire value chain. We cover 80% of the whole market of our associates and affiliates. We have covered many regions. And in fact, we're supporting also improvements in terms of supplies. We have all the dry benefits, and we've been supported also in terms of improving our storage facilities. And we have collective benefits. 100% of our coffee is processed in one single plant. So that benefits the entire community. But we do have a serious problem regarding climate change, because we currently have a plant to be able to dry coffee beans over 24, 48 hours with specific technology, ensuring the quality of our coffee. We also have great success in terms of our certifications. We, as a cooperative, we are seen as an excellent company, and we have been selected as the best processors and exporters in Nicaragua. We've also improved and invested on a certain type of coffee, which has also been supported by Nicaragua in order to improve our production capacity and capability, and also our marketing strategy for our products. We have an excellent product, but certainly part of that, of course, means marketing better so that we can improve. In terms of our organization, we have 38 cooperatives. They all comply with the legislation in our country, with all the certifications, and we have reformed something that has led us to a great success. After 30 years, we have amended our statutes and have taken on a comprehensive approach in terms of gender equality. We have an assembly, 50% men, 50% women. In our top brass, we have 50% women and 50% men. And also, for many years now, women have been working in our cooperative, and we're guaranteeing excellence. In our cooperative, we look to sustainability. We've made great investments in terms of helping producers in setting up their greenhouses, planting new crops. We have more than 1,340,000 coffee bean trees which have been planted to rehabilitate, renovate our crops. We have more than 30,000 hectares, and we have been working with agroecology, with that sustainable approach, and 40% of our production is organic. And we want to try and increase that rate so that we can also improve quality of soil. We've received support from IFAD for our pilot projects in trying to renovate these areas. We also have a safety and agro-safety protocol. We've been working on this for a long time, and now we have a strategy in place which is well designed. We'll implement it over the next couple of years. We are thinking of diversifying our activity. We've also had support from this IFAD project in terms of diversification of crops, looking at banana plantations and others, to try to generate more revenue for the families that depend on our cooperative. Of course, we need a lot of consulting work. We are looking at a large area with farms that are dispersed, scattered around the country. But thanks to the project with Cataralpa, we managed to get to a very significant number of producers, more than 1,200 and producers on board, and more than 3,000 courses to help people. We also have our certification, our accreditation, which is basically a tool to better sell our coffee on the international markets. We're also unrolling social projects to protect children, to protect women, and all these policies allow us to work better access to water, better health, better grants and subsidies for young children. That's a very general summary of all our achievements as a cooperative, but we also have a lot of challenges in terms of the future. Namely, the main challenge is to improve the quality of life of families that live from coffee so that they get decent wages from their work. Also, vulnerability in the face of climate change. We are still extremely vulnerable. We've worked a lot on this, but change is accelerating and rocketing. As has been mentioned, in the region, we suffered an extraordinarily long drought, and all our coffee plants and trees were affected, even the varieties that we thought were more resilient. So this has led to lower productivity and less revenue. So we have to work on improving our productivity. As to the necessary resources to implement the food safety, we need more funding. This has been working. We have been working jointly with our producers, but we need more resources to implement this strategy. As to funds for investment, we need investments for better infrastructure so that we can serve the international market. We are improving slowly but surely, but it's still a challenge. Another significant challenge is digitalization. We need to change our technology. That's important, but it's also a question of access to technology. Remember that sometimes it's extremely expensive, and small, poor farmers cannot really develop digitalization in a quick fashion. Another major challenge is access to markets, taking into account the changes in markets, not only how to sell or buy, but also changes in EU directives, so many directives and legislation changes that we have to take on board and well, like zero deforestation. Yes, indeed, that's extremely important, but we would have to work a lot more with help of everyone, all the actors, in order to avoid deforestation. Also, legislation on organic materials and waste. We also have to adapt to that. Also, human rights and environmental rights, another big challenge in many rural communities, given the vulnerability that we have in our system. This also means a lot more expense and expenditure in terms of purchasing supplies, and that brings other challenges, as mentioned already, inclusion of the youth, for example, young people in our community, so that they can get fair wages. We have trained a lot of young people in agriculture, farming, quality control, training regarding processes, also training them to be bar managers, but then we don't have the resources to keep them in our communities. And also, of course, implementations of gender policies to empower women economically, socially, and environmentally. That's another big challenge. Let me finish by saying that we are working in our project on all the parts of the value chain. We've had support from the ministry. It's been very fortunate to be able to work together on this. We've been able to bring on board other cooperation resources, international loans and donations. And of course, we work with our sister organization, Fair Trade, but we're trying to adopt a comprehensive approach, a holistic approach that takes into account all the challenges that we have ahead. Thank you very much. Thank you, dear Director. Now we'll be hearing from Oscar Quesada, Executive Director of SICA, that is the Central American Integration System. He's the advisor to the Executive Director. You're going to be telling us about the challenges and opportunities in the dry corridor, and specifically for your organization, SICA. Well, thank you very much. Good afternoon and good morning to all those taking part in this meeting, IFAD authorities, representatives of ministries of agriculture and other parts of government. Also, my greetings to social organizations, civil organizations taking part. My warmest greetings from the Executive Director of SICA, Mrs. Ingrid Figueroa, who was unfortunately unable to connect because she has another pressing engagement. I have been designated by her to address some of the messages that she wanted to communicate to you today. So those of you who are not familiar with SICA, the Central America Integration System, it's a system for regional integration that covers a number of countries: Belize, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Panama, the Dominican Republic. And this is a regional platform which was created thanks to the effort of all the governments of these member states. And it was created in the meeting of heads of state and government years ago. It has a number of council of ministers, sector by sector, so that there is ample and broad representation, both in terms of sectors and topics. Now, in this context of integration, the Central America Dry Corridor has been one of the most salient strategic points for SICA for a number of years now. Now, more recently, the member states have agreed to broaden their action to cover other arid zones in the SICA area, which share the same risks and opportunities as does the dry corridor. So right now, we're not only talking about the Central America dry corridor, but that in addition with other dry areas in SICA countries. And we want to focus on this like an area for opportunities. I think some speakers have referred to this, opportunities. We must not only focus on negative, but also on the great potential that we have in this region. So the dry corridor and the arid areas of SICA have environmental, productive, social, economic connotations. Farming is dominant. So that means that with a regional approach, we can reduce food insecurity, poverty, and increase opportunities. It's also true that in this broad region, we see the greatest vulnerabilities around the world in terms of climate change and social inclusion or exclusion, also food safety. Millions of people are in food insecurity. We also see huge migratory flows, a huge gap in terms of digitalization, but especially we see the need to create better opportunities for young people, indigenous communities, and women, amongst others. So in this context of huge opportunities, but also challenges, a very broad area, we need to share this burden between various states. We need a regional action plan, that's imperative. And within SICA, we promote instruments, tools, legislation, programs, strategies, sector by sector or intersectoral plans and strategies to allow us to have this much broader, comprehensive vision and view to be able to tackle these problems, which are so great, but while also capitalizing on the opportunities. So SICA has a national and territorial presence, and that allows us to have a multi-dimensional, multi-level approach. Now, in order to act in the dry corridor and the arid areas in SICA countries, this is strategic in nature. We cannot only think about the regional level, we have to look at national levels and also local territorial levels. And we've seen it today. Manuel, as representing the Agriculture Ministry, has noted this. Mrs. Iliana also referred to some of our policies which have been approved by SICA. So basically, yes, we have a broad reach now, which is allowing us to articulate this intersectoral, multidimensional, multi-level approach. And thanks to this, we are bringing together two strategic sectors, farming and the environment, which together link up with other sectors like social and economic sectors. So SICA by itself could be seen as a regional platform for coordination of policies, coordination of international collaboration, management of knowledge, also to generate multinational plans and strategies which are articulated. And a challenge that we, both IFAD and SICA, share is to give added value from the regional to the national level. I think that's what I've heard as well when reading the results of the evaluation. We can't have the national level separated from the regional level. In terms of SICA, our representatives, our members, are members of the governments. They approve our plans and strategies, and ultimately, they are the ones who take it down to the territories in their countries. Invariably, not always, we also have dialogues with social actors on the territory. It would be great to have dialogue all the time, like ICADERT, the Latin American Agency for Social and Economic Development, as an example. But it's very important to have dialogue with regional agencies, which also give us added value. They also comply with SDGs, the UN framework for climate change, the UN Treaty on Biodiversity, and the fight against deforestation, and many other treaties at international level. So this really highlights that in the region, we have a sensitive, sensible, and a good policy at regional level, looking at sustainability, resilience, food security, but it requires coordinated efforts to reinforce our action, to generate innovative tools that allow us to implement our policies so that they will be part of the public legacy of legislation to cover the dry corridor and arid areas in the region without leaving anyone behind. So there are a number of initiatives that have been rolled out in the region with participation of the United Nations, other agencies. We're working on that from SICA. Also, AFOLU, the research program that's being promoted by many. Manuel also mentioned another great initiative there. All of this is being supported by SICA. Now, these projects have enormous dimensions, but they're still insufficient in terms of the needs in the dry corridor. So support from IFAD, integration on the part of IFAD to achieve coordination and better collaboration will allow us to maximize our efforts and also support from other agencies. I think these initiatives have already been mentioned throughout the day, the dry corridor and farming, climate change, mapping of the soil, national institutes on research for farming, digital systems, integrated water resources systems, and many others. Now, here we are seeing the convergence of a huge number of agencies, international bodies, bilateral agreements that are coming in, and this is very important, very significant. So we are here for IFAD so that we can discuss all of this. Right now, we're looking at the implementation of the action plan for nutrition, food safety plan for 2024-2028, and implementing that action plan in the dry corridor and other arid areas in countries covered by SICA, I think would be a very important step forward. And in order to wrap up now, let me underline the importance, the added value that we can provide with our regional perspective. I don't think we have to look at it, and I'm going to be very respectful in my remarks. We don't see this, please, see it as an investment, not as a waste of money. It's an investment to foster and consolidate national action and SICA action with all the countries in the region. When we talk about the dry corridor, we necessarily have to talk about integration, common policies and strategies. So I would like to urge you all to invite you from the General Secretariat of SICA so that we can work together. We're all trying to work together to build a region of opportunities for the citizens of Central America. And we would very much like to continue this dialogue. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. Quesada. I'd like to give the floor now to Claudia Renaboldo for a summary and on opportunities in the dry corridor from the point of view of territorial development. Again, thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon. I'm going to go very quickly as I've been asked to go because we're running out of time. I would just like to underline some elements that I've got out of the presentations from my prior speakers. The dry corridor can be seen as an opportunity for territorial development, just as was pointed out by Mr. Oscar Quesada, because when we talk about this territorial approach, we're not just focusing on a local level. We need to see this in an articulated manner, taking into account other levels, national levels too, and regional levels. So There are particular things that are important. The first thing I'm going to refer to is what Oscar mentioned, and that is that the SICA has worked on several regional strategies. And not only that, but in IFAD, we have a vision that links up to this territorial development that has been worked on since 2019. And this is this new vision towards new rural aspects that IFAD has worked on hand in hand with the CEPAL. We have evaluations, assessments that have been done in the Academy on the 15 years of rural territorial development in terms of challenges and whatnot. And Ileana also said very clearly that we mustn't forget about what we've done in the past, IFAD and the Latin American governments. And she focused on the importance of rural dialogue and a multiplayer and institutional dialogue at that. There are several opportunities for this territorial development that I'd like to underline because they have been mentioned by several of the speakers, including the Director General and other opinions given on Latin America, and that is that we should take into account the demands and strategies of those who find themselves in the territories, the local players. And so therefore, we need to look bottom up. And we need to look at this not only basing ourselves on the approach of demand, but rather the dialogue between those players and the local dynamics. This is something that is extremely important that we need to look into. And also there is this coordination at different levels, not only territorial, local and national. We talk about public institutions, local institutions, the municipalities and the associations. And it's also a question of farming or producer associations, but also associations in the territories. And I'm not talking about organizations that have just cropped up when a project has arisen, but rather we have private companies that can make a difference in the territories. We also have that cooperation that can take place. So these dry corridors this dry corridor has the great opportunity now, and we have a lot of people sitting around this virtual table to be able to pool resources. We otherwise may be doing ourselves in if we don't take a step forward, as Ms. Palastri said, to be able to be successful. And there are two last elements that I think are relevant. One of these is that we can't continue seeing the countryside from the point of view only of the countryside. Growth in the region, in intermediate villages and towns is essential, not only to ensure that young people remain in the countryside, but also because of vulnerable populations, the young people and women should have other opportunities. And this is not just the agri sector that needs to look into this, but it is other services and activities to do with employment that has to come into play. And also, we mustn't forget that several of you have mentioned the fact that the generation and creation of knowledge is essential. And this needs to be an important input for the creation of public policies on an international and regional basis, but particularly on a territorial basis in order to solve public policy issues. And as Oscar said, the territorialization. And in addition, there has to be training, which is modern and innovative, upskilling that will include the local players, but also those that take decisions, civil servants, and social partners in international organizations and academia. So I hope that I've covered all the matters in good time. Thank you very much, Claudia. And now we do have to start concluding. I think there may have been a question by Mr. Cesar Vertedan from Guatemala. And bilaterally, I think that my colleagues from the regional division from Latin America have already answered. And so They will get in contact with the people in IFAD who are in charge of the program in Guatemala. There were also 2 questions from Glyson Ferrari, and we will answer these questions bilaterally too. I do apologize, but we do have to manage the time and adjourn the session. So thank you very much for your questions, and we will reply to these on an individual basis. So I'm going to give the floor back to the Director of the Independent Office of Evaluation, Dr. Indran Naidu, to adjourn the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Faloni. Distinguished Manuel Antonio Martinez Guzman, dear representatives of IFAD, partner institutions, and international organizations such as PRISMA, SICA, and Protocorp. Ladies and gentlemen, the Independent Office of Evaluation of IFAD has undertaken an impartial and evidence-based evaluation of IFAD's experience in the dry corridor of Central America. I believe that today's candid and engaging discussion has provided better insights in order to translate the evaluation findings and lessons into inputs to prepare a more strategic approach to IFAD-funded operations in this critical ecozone, in collaboration with national, international, and regional partners. I reiterate my gratitude to the governments of El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. I thank the representative of IFAD's management who attended the event and supported the evaluation. Finally, I warmly thank all of you who have participated and shared so generously your views. We hope that today's workshop may spark further exchange and discussion amongst yourselves towards interventions that have strong impact on eliminating poverty and improving the rural livelihoods for women, men, and youths. I thank you for your attention. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you to all participations. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And Glyson, we will answer your question on an individual basis. Thank you.